Gaslighting was Merriam-Webster's word of the year for 2022, with an increase of 1,700% of lookups from the year before. So that shows that a lot of people want to know, what in the heck is gaslighting? So let's have a look at what gaslighting actually is and see if it's happening to you. Hi, I'm Ashton. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I'm an HSP. And let's have a look at what in the world gaslighting is. So gaslighting comes from a 1938 play in which a man named Jack bought a house because he thought there were hidden jewels in the attic. And he would go up there at night and he would turn the gas light on. And in those days, when you would turn a gas light on that was on a singular gas line, the rest of the lights in the house would dim. So when he would go in the attic and turn the gas light up, the house lights would dim and his wife would notice. And he didn't want his wife to know what he was doing up there. So he would tell her that she was imagining the lights are dimming. And he would try to make her think that she's going crazy. So this is where the term gaslight comes from. It's not actually a clinical term. It's a colloquial term that was originally mainstream, that's made its way in the therapy room, although it's not in the DSM or basically has any clinical foundation. I do hear it once in a while in my private practice, but it's also a word that has gotten really misconstrued. So let's really look and see what it means. So Merriam-Webster basically says that gaslighting is intentionally manipulating a person so that they question the validity of their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. And therefore, it can lead to self-doubt, a decrease in self-confidence, not trusting yourself, and basically thinking that you're going crazy. So there's also medical gaslighting. That can happen when a doctor says it's all in your head or you're just imagining it. It must be psychosomatic, which actually is a real thing. But medical gaslighting can happen, I think, more commonly with highly sensitive people or HSPs because we are so in tune with our bodies. And oftentimes we notice things in our bodies that show up even before it shows up on labs or other diagnostics. So gaslighting is, in its most extreme sense, emotional abuse. And that's really what we're talking about when we're referring to gaslighting. In its most conservative sense, gaslighting can be diminishing another person's experience. So if you find this information helpful, hit the like button, consider subscribing, and turn on the notifications so you'll know when part 2 and part 3 of this video come out. So for now, I want to look at some examples of what gaslighting is. So let's say that there's a wife and she's having an affair. And the husband is he's suspecting that she's having an affair. He's feeling it in his gut. He might even see some signs that she's having an affair. Maybe her behavior is secretive, or, he sees her deleting texts or going in private to take a phone call. And he asks her about this and she denies it. Maybe he sees some more evidence. Maybe he finds a letter or something and she just continues to say, oh, that's just from a friend or an old boyfriend. But he knows in his gut that something's going on. So as the wife continues to deny and lie, she's gaslighting him because he knows that something's going on. She won't admit it. Another example of gaslighting could be, let's say you have a teenager who's using drugs, and perhaps you're not very drug savvy, so you don't really know what the signs are. You don't know what to look for. You don't know really much about it, but you suspect that something's off with your teenager. And so you confront your teenager and you say, hey, are you smoking pot or weed? That's what they say nowadays, right? And the teenager says, no, Mom, like, what are you talking about? Like, that's no. And she said, well, there's this funny smell. And he says, or she says, well, it must have been a skunk. And she says, but your eyes have been looking kind of weird lately. They're like kind of red and kind of glassy. And he says, or she, no, mom, you must be my allergies. So the parent is really suspecting that there's something going on with their child, and the child is denying it, so that the parent really questions, like, well, gosh, is it a skunk? Is it allergies? Like, what in the world is going on here? So in the first two examples, gaslighting is really about the person trying to protect themselves through lying, right? In the first example, the wife doesn't want to get found out that she's having an affair. In the second example, the teenager doesn't want to get busted for using drugs. So a more egregious example is when somebody intentionally deceives. So let's say, and it often happens with people who are really not mentally well. It could be with a true narcissistic personality disorder. In this example, the perpetrator, I'm going to use the word perpetrator and victim just for clarity's sake. The perpetrator would intentionally do things to trick the victim. An example of when a perpetrator might intentionally be trying to mess with somebody or emotionally abuse or make a person think they're going crazy could be something like, let's say they go to the victim's car, they change the settings in the car, like they move the seat or they change the height of the steering wheel. Nothing too crazy where it's like really noticeable, but just a little bit. So the steering wheel is just enough for somebody to notice. And then the victim goes to the perpetrator and says, hey, were you driving my car? The steering wheel feels off and the seat doesn't seem quite right. And the perpetrator says, no, I wasn't in your car. I don't know what you're talking about. So most people don't go to this level of gaslighting. So, and really what we're talking about is people trying to protect themselves, like in the first two examples. Okay, so what in the world does this have to do with a highly sensitive person? And what can we do about it? Well, those are questions that I'm going to answer in part 2 and part 3 of this video series. So don't forget to hit your notification bell so that you can be notified when they come out. And remember, when you understand your sensitivity, you too can claim it as your greatest asset.